The crimson sands have stretched endlessly beyond the crystalline walls of the imperial palace, where Empress stood gazing through the transparent aluminum viewing deck. Her 6 arms moved in practiced gestures as she reviewed tactical reports on her holographic display, each movement precise and calculated. The Empire had conquered 47 star systems in the past century, but something troubled the violet-skinned ruler more than any military campaign ever had arrived on 3 months ago as part of a diplomatic exchange program between Earth and the expanding alien empire. What started as a routine cultural mission had quickly evolved into something far more significant. The humans' performance in the gladiatorial trials, originally intended as mere entertainment for visiting dignitaries, had shattered every record in history. "Impossible," whispered General N as he watched the security footage for the 100th time. The recording showed facing down a war beast, a creature that had killed dozens of trained warriors over the years. Where others had fallen to its razor-sharp claws and acidic breath, the human had moved with fluid grace, anticipating attacks that should have been unpredictable. His victory wasn't just surprising, it was revolutionary. Stood in the training facility, sweat glistening on his tanned skin as he completed another impossible routine. The gravity on was 30% higher than Earth's, yet he moved as if the extra weight meant nothing. His brown eyes focused on the holographic projections that simulated various combat scenarios, each one designed to push even the most elite soldiers to their limits. "How does he do it?" asked Sergeant Ra, her mandibles clicking in confusion. She had been training warriors for 2 decades and had never seen anything like such adaptability. The humans seemed to process information at impossible speeds, making split-second decisions that professional soldiers would need minutes to calculate. The answer lay in humanity's evolutionary path, though they didn't understand it yet. Earth's chaotic environment had produced a species that thrived under pressure, adapted quickly to changing circumstances, and possessed an almost supernatural ability to read patterns in their opponent's behavior. While other species had evolved in relatively stable environments, humans had survived ice ages, volcanic catastrophes, and countless predators through sheer determination and tactical thinking. Empress had been watching progress with growing interest. The species faced a critical challenge that threatened their empire's future. Their females reached maturity at precisely 200 standard years, but their biological compatibility with males had been declining for generations. Scientists attributed this to genetic stagnation. Their controlled breeding programs had eliminated much of the natural diversity that made successful reproduction possible. The Empress had consulted with her council of advisors, including the Empire's most brilliant geneticists and strategists. Doctor, the lead researcher on reproductive biology, had presented alarming statistics. "Your Majesty, our birth rates have dropped by 60% over the past 50 years. If current trends continue, the species will face extinction within 3 centuries. This crisis had led to desperate measures. The Empire had attempted breeding programs with other allied species, but the genetic incompatibilities had resulted in either failed pregnancies or offspring with severe developmental problems. Every solution seemed to create more problems, and the Empress found herself facing the possible collapse of her civilization's future. Then arrived, and everything changed. The human's genetic structure was unlike anything scientists had encountered. His DNA showed remarkable stability while maintaining incredible diversity, a combination that their species had lost ago. More importantly, preliminary compatibility tests suggested that human hybridization might not only be possible, but could actually strengthen both genetic lines. "The human cellular regeneration rate exceeds our own by a factor of 3, Doctor reported during a classified briefing. His immune system shows resistance to diseases that have plagued our people for generations. Most remarkably, his genetic markers suggest that offspring would inherit enhanced versions of both species' strongest traits." Empress made her decision during a private session in her quarters, surrounded by the floating meditation crystals that helped her focus during difficult choices. The walls displayed star maps of her empire, each system representing millions of lives depending on her leadership. The weight of her species' survival rested on her shoulders, and she knew that conventional solutions had failed. Was summoned to the throne room the following morning. The massive chamber could hold thousands of beings, its curved walls rising toward a domed ceiling painted with scenes of victories throughout history. Golden light filtered through geometric windows, casting complex patterns across the polished floors where boots echoed as he approached the Empress's elevated platform. "Human warrior's voice resonated through the chamber, amplified by acoustic engineering that made every word crystal clear. "Your performance in our trials has been extraordinary. You have demonstrated capabilities that surpass our finest soldiers and proven yourself worthy of the highest honors our empire can bestow." Stood at attention, his military training evident in his posture despite the alien environment. He had served as a special forces operative before the diplomatic mission, and his experience in high-stress situations helped him maintain composure even as he wondered what the Empress intended. "Your Majesty," replied, his voice steady and respectful, "I am honored by your recognition. I came here as a representative of humanity, hoping to build understanding between our peoples." The Empress descended from her platform, her 6 arms moving in gestures that conveyed both authority and something that might have been vulnerability. As she approached, noticed details he had missed during formal ceremonies: the intricate scarification on her arms that marked her royal lineage, the way her violet eyes seemed to analyze everything around her, and the burden of leadership that seemed to weigh on her shoulders. "The understanding you seek may be deeper than you imagine," said, stopping just beyond traditional diplomatic distance. "I am about to make a request that will challenge both your beliefs and your loyalty to your own kind. What I ask could change the fate of both our species, but it requires a sacrifice that no being should have to make." Felt his pulse quicken, though his expression remained neutral. His training had taught him to expect the unexpected, but something in the Empress's tone suggested that whatever she planned would test him in ways he had never imagined. "Our species stands at the edge of extinction," the Empress continued, her voice carrying the weight of desperate hope. "Our reproductive biology has failed us, and conventional solutions have proven inadequate. You represent something we have never encountered, a genetic compatibility that could save both our civilizations." The implications hit like a physical blow, though he managed to keep his reaction internal. He had studied culture extensively during his preparation for the mission, and he understood what the Empress was suggesting. The diplomatic mission was about to become something far more personal and complex. 37 of our females will reach maturity within the next 6 months, explained, her violet eyes fixed on his face as she watched for his reaction. "Each represents not just an individual life, but the potential future of our entire species. They are the daughters of our most honored families, educated in statecraft, warfare, and the sciences that keep our empire functioning." Processed this information while maintaining his diplomatic composure, though his mind raced with questions and implications. The Empress wasn't just asking for his genetic contribution. She was asking him to become integral to the survival of an entire civilization. "I understand the magnitude of what you're suggesting, Your Majesty," said carefully. "But this decision affects not just me, but the relationship between our species and the future of both civilizations. I would need to understand exactly what you're asking and what the consequences might be." The Empress nodded, appreciating his measured response. "You would be honored above all other beings in our empire. These females have been prepared for this moment their entire lives. They understand the significance of what we ask, and they have volunteered for this duty because they believe in the future of our species." As listened, he began to understand the true scope of what the Empress proposed. This wasn't just about biological compatibility. It was about forging a new kind of alliance between species, one that would bind humanity and the Empire together in ways that traditional treaties could never achieve. The conversation continued for hours, covering everything from the practical aspects of the arrangement to the political implications for both civilizations. Learned that the selected females were not just randomly chosen. Each had been evaluated for psychological compatibility, intellectual capacity, and genetic markers that suggested the highest probability of successful hybridization. Doctor joined the discussion to explain the scientific aspects of the proposal. Her research indicated that human offspring would likely inherit enhanced physical capabilities from both species, potentially creating a new generation that could thrive in environments that would challenge either parent species alone. "The preliminary genetic modeling suggests extraordinary possibilities," the doctor explained, her 4 eyes blinking in sequence as she accessed data from her neural implant. "Enhanced longevity, improved disease resistance, and cognitive abilities that exceed either baseline species. These children could represent the next step in evolutionary development for both our peoples. As the day progressed, found himself facing the most difficult decision of his life. The Empress had made it clear that this was a request, not a command, but he also understood the desperate circumstances that had led to this moment. The fate of an entire species hung in the balance, and his choice would determine whether the empire would thrive or slowly fade into extinction. The weight of responsibility was overwhelming, but also recognized an opportunity to forge a connection between species that could benefit both civilizations for generations to come. His decision would require him to look beyond his own preferences and consider the broader implications for the future of both humanity and the people. Evening approached as the discussions continued, and realized that whatever choice he made would irrevocably change his life and potentially alter the course of galactic history. The Empress had offered him time to consider his decision, but the urgency of the situation meant that delay could have consequences neither species could afford. Standing in the observation deck as twin suns set beyond the horizon, contemplated a future he had never imagined when he first arrived on this alien world. The path ahead was uncertain, but the potential consequences of both action and inaction would shape the destiny of billions of lives across the galaxy. Spent 3 sleepless nights in his diplomatic quarters, wrestling with the decision that would define not just his future, but potentially the survival of an entire civilization. The weight of the Empress's request had transformed his simple cultural exchange mission into something that challenged everything he thought he knew about duty, sacrifice, and the bonds between species. On the 4th morning, he made his choice. "I accept," announced when he was brought before Empress in her private council chamber. "But I have conditions that must be met for both our people's sake." The Empress's violet eyes widened slightly, her 6 arms moving in gestures that had learned indicated both surprise and respect. In culture, negotiating with the Empress was considered either incredibly brave or dangerously foolish, but its direct approach had earned her attention. "Speak your conditions, human warrior," commanded, leaning forward on her elevated platform. Had spent those sleepless nights crafting his response, drawing on both his military training and his diplomatic education. First, any children born from these unions must have the right to choose their own path when they come of age. They will not be bred like livestock or treated as political tools. They are individuals who deserve the same freedoms as any citizen of either civilization. The Empress considered this carefully. In society, offspring of important bloodlines were typically assigned roles based on genetic aptitude and social needs, but its condition challenged this fundamental aspect of their culture. Second, continued, "I want to establish a cultural exchange program where human educators work alongside teachers. These children will need to understand both heritages to truly bridge our civilizations. They should be raised with knowledge of both Earth and." Doctor, who had been observing the negotiations, clicked her mandibles in what had learned was a sign of intrigue. "Your genetic contribution is valuable, but your cultural insights may be equally important. These hybrid children will face challenges that neither species has encountered before." "Third," said, his voice carrying the authority he had developed during military command, "I need to meet with each of the females individually before any formal ceremony. This cannot be a cold transaction. If we're creating a new future for both species, it needs to be built on mutual respect and understanding." The Empress stood and descended from her platform, her movements graceful despite her imposing height. "Your conditions are unusual, but they demonstrate the kind of thinking that makes your species remarkable. Very well of Earth, your terms are accepted." The formal announcement of the arrangement sent shockwaves throughout the Empire. News traveled through quantum communication networks to every corner of their 47 star systems, sparking debates in governing councils and scientific institutions across the galaxy. Some viewed as a savior who would ensure their species' survival, while others questioned whether hybridization represented evolution or contamination of their bloodlines. Began meeting with the selected females in small groups, each session held in different locations throughout the Imperial complex. The palace's architects had designed spaces that could accommodate various cultural preferences, and found himself in gardens filled with bioluminescent plants, libraries containing knowledge from dozens of worlds, and training facilities where the females demonstrated their own remarkable abilities. The first female he met was daughter of Admiral Han, who commanded the Third Fleet. She possessed the deep violet skin typical of military bloodlines, but her 4 eyes held an intelligence that found immediately captivating. Unlike many who seemed intimidated by his presence, studied him with the analytical gaze of a seasoned strategist. "I have read all available data on human military tactics," she said during their first private conversation in the tactical simulation chamber. "Your species' approach to warfare is fascinating, chaotic yet effective, driven by emotion yet strategically sound. How do you reconcile these contradictions?" Smiled, appreciating her directness. "Humans don't see them as contradictions. We've learned that emotion and logic aren't opposites, they're complementary forces. Our greatest victories have come when we combined passionate determination with careful planning." Their conversation lasted for hours as they discussed everything from battle strategies to philosophical approaches to leadership. Discovered that had been studying human history through intercepted communications and was particularly interested in how humanity had overcome seemingly impossible odds throughout their development. "Your species has faced extinction multiple times," she observed, accessing historical data through her neural implant. "Ice ages, volcanic catastrophes, plagues, wars, yet you not only survived but thrived. How?" "Adaptability," replied without hesitation. "Humans have always been good at changing when we need to. We don't just survive challenges, we learn from them and become stronger." Each subsequent meeting revealed the remarkable diversity among the selected females. Nuss specialized in xenobiology and had spent decades studying the genetic structures of various species. She approached their potential partnership from a purely scientific perspective, discussing the theoretical advantages their offspring might possess while maintaining the detached curiosity of a dedicated researcher. "Preliminary genetic modeling suggests extraordinary possibilities," Nuh explained during their meeting in her private laboratory. "Human DNA shows remarkable plasticity while maintaining stability, a combination our species lost ago. Your cellular repair mechanisms could extend our natural by several centuries." Ra came from an artistic bloodline and viewed their arrangement through the lens of cultural creation. She had been composing epic poems about the merger of species and saw their potential offspring as living art that would represent the highest achievement of both civilizations. "Each child will be a bridge between worlds," Ra said as she showed her latest composition. The words were displayed in flowing script that seemed to dance across holographic displays. "They will carry the strength of both bloodlines and the wisdom of dual heritage." Not all the meetings went smoothly. Daughter of a prominent industrial leader, initially viewed with suspicion and barely concealed hostility. She had opposed the arrangement from the beginning, arguing that their species should solve their reproductive crisis through advances in genetic engineering rather than hybridization with aliens. "You represent everything I find problematic about this plan," she told bluntly during their first encounter in a neutral meeting room. "We are abandoning our genetic purity for the sake of convenience, and I question whether survival is worth such compromise." Respected her honesty and chose not to try changing her mind immediately. Instead, he asked questions about her concerns and listened carefully to her responses. Over several meetings, he learned that opposition came from genuine love for her species rather than prejudice against humans. "I have studied your world's history," she admitted during their third conversation. "Your species has incredible potential, but also a tendency toward violence and environmental destruction. I worry about what traits our children might inherit." "Those are fair concerns," acknowledged. "But you're looking at only part of the picture. Yes, humans have made mistakes, but we've also shown a remarkable ability to recognize our errors and work to correct them. The same drive that led to our problems has also led to our greatest achievements." Their discussions became increasingly philosophical as they explored questions about identity, heritage, and the nature of civilization itself. Found that challenges forced him to articulate aspects of humanity that he had never fully examined, while her insights into culture helped him understand the weight of responsibility that came with his decision. The breakthrough came when suggested they visit the Imperial Archives together. The massive repository contained the complete history of the Empire, including detailed records of their expansion across the galaxy and their interactions with other species. "Look at this," said, pointing to a display showing the conquest of the system. Your people encountered a species that was completely different from yourselves, silicon-based life forms that communicated through electromagnetic pulses. You didn't destroy them or force them to assimilate. You learned from them and incorporated their knowledge into your own civilization. Studied the historical records, her 4 eyes tracking the complex diplomatic and cultural exchanges that had followed the expansion into space. We gained much from that encounter, she admitted. Their understanding of quantum mechanics revolutionized our faster-than-light travel capabilities. Exactly, continued. Your species has always grown stronger through contact with others. What we're proposing isn't contamination. It's continuation of that tradition on the most fundamental biological level. By the end of their meetings, had moved from opposition to cautious acceptance. She still harbored concerns about the long-term implications of hybridization, but she had come to understand that the alternative, extinction, was far worse than the risks involved in creating a new kind of future. The most challenging meeting was with Elle, the youngest of the selected females and daughter of the Empire's chief scientist. At barely past her maturity threshold, she possessed an innocence that made acutely aware of the responsibility he was accepting. Unlike the others, who approached the arrangement as a duty or scientific endeavor, Elle seemed genuinely curious about the emotional aspects of creating life with another being. I have never encountered a human before your arrival, she confessed during their first meeting in the palace gardens. My knowledge comes entirely from scientific data and cultural reports. I find myself wondering what it means to create offspring with someone from such a different background. Chose his words carefully, recognizing that Elle's youth made her both more vulnerable and potentially more adaptable to the unprecedented situation they all faced. I think it means we'll need to learn from each other. Your children, our children, will have questions that neither of our species can answer alone. They'll need parents who are willing to explore new ways of thinking together. Their conversations often focused on practical matters like child-rearing, education, and cultural transmission. Elle had been studying human family structures and was fascinated by concepts like emotional bonding between parents and children, which played a much smaller role in traditional society. Human offspring remain dependent on their parents for an extended period, she observed. This creates emotional connections that influence behavior throughout their lives. Our children will need such bonds if they are to successfully integrate both heritages. As the weeks passed, found himself forming genuine connections with each of the females. What had begun as a diplomatic arrangement was evolving into something more complex, relationships that combined elements of friendship, shared purpose, and mutual respect. He began to understand that the success of their venture would depend not just on genetic compatibility, but on their ability to create a new kind of social structure that honored both traditions while forging something entirely unprecedented. The preparations for the formal ceremony began as the first of the females approached her optimal reproductive window. Tradition required elaborate rituals that honored both bloodlines and invoked the blessing of their ancestors, but presence meant that human customs would need to be incorporated as well. Doctors supervised the medical preparations, ensuring that all participants were in optimal health and that the genetic compatibility markers remained stable. Her research had progressed to the point where she could predict with reasonable accuracy which pairings were most likely to result in successful pregnancies and healthy offspring. The preliminary genetic sequences suggest remarkable hybrid vigor, she reported to the Empress during a private briefing. These children will likely possess enhanced physical capabilities, extended and cognitive abilities that exceed either baseline species. They represent a genuine evolutionary advancement. As the ceremony approached, reflected on the journey that had brought him to this moment. What had started as a routine diplomatic mission had become something that would fundamentally alter the relationship between humanity and the Empire. The children born from these unions would be living bridges between civilizations, carrying the heritage of both species into an uncertain but potentially extraordinary future. The weight of responsibility was immense, but had come to understand that some choices transcended individual concerns. He was no longer just a human warrior or a diplomatic representative. He had become a key figure in the evolution of two species and the creation of something entirely new in the galaxy's history. The ceremony took place in the Crystal Amphitheater, a massive structure at the heart of the Imperial Palace that had witnessed the most significant events in history for over a millennium. The translucent walls curved upward toward a domed ceiling that displayed real-time images of the stars, while the floor was inscribed with genetic sequences representing every major bloodline in the empire. Stood at the center of the amphitheater, wearing a specially designed uniform that combined elements from both human military tradition and ceremonial dress. The fabric was woven with bioluminescent fibers that responded to his heartbeat, creating subtle patterns of light that rippled across the material as he moved. Around his wrist, he wore a quantum communicator that would maintain contact with Earth throughout the proceedings. Empress presided over the ceremony from an elevated platform that put her at the focal point of the amphitheater's acoustic design. Her voice carried clearly to every corner of the space as she began the traditional invocations that honored the ancestors and requested their blessing for the unprecedented union about to take place. Today we witness the joining of bloodlines that spans the stars, the Empress declared, her 6 arms moving in intricate gestures that had been passed down through generations of royal ceremonies. 2 species, born of different worlds and shaped by different challenges, come together to create something that has never existed before. The 37 females entered the amphitheater in order of their bloodline hierarchy, each wearing robes that displayed the heraldic symbols of their families. The procession was both beautiful and solemn, representing not just individual choices, but the collective decision of the Empire's most prominent bloodlines to stake their genetic future on this unprecedented experiment. Led the procession, her military bearing evident in every step as she approached the ceremonial platform. Behind her came Na, whose scientific mind was undoubtedly analyzing every aspect of the proceedings, followed by Ra, who moved with the fluid grace of someone accustomed to performance and artistic expression. As each female took her position in the complex geometric pattern that the ceremony required, felt the weight of their collective gaze. These were not passive participants in some ancient ritual. They were intelligent, accomplished individuals who had chosen to become part of something that would reshape the future of both species. Doctor supervised the genetic compatibility readings, monitoring bioscanners that confirmed the optimal conditions for successful hybridization. Her research had identified specific timing windows that would maximize the probability of successful conception and healthy offspring development. All participants show optimal genetic compatibility markers, she announced to the assembly. The probability matrices indicate a success rate exceeding 90%, with genetic diversity indexes that suggest robust hybrid vigor in all potential offspring combinations. The Empress called for the formal exchange of vows, a tradition that had been modified to accommodate the unique nature of this arrangement. Each female would speak individually, expressing their commitment not just to but to the future they were creating together. Was the first to speak, her voice carrying the authority she had inherited from generations of military leaders. I pledge my genetic heritage and my commitment to raising children who will honor both bloodlines. Our offspring will be warriors not just in battle, but in the greater war against extinction and stagnation. Na followed with a scientist's precision, outlining her dedication to understanding and nurturing the unique biological gifts their children would possess. I commit to documenting and supporting the development of hybrid characteristics that may represent the next step in evolutionary advancement for both our species. Each vow was unique, reflecting the individual personality and perspective of its speaker, but all shared common themes of hope, responsibility, and dedication to creating a future that transcended traditional boundaries between species. When spoke, his words were broadcast simultaneously to Earth through the quantum communicator, allowing his own people to witness this historic moment. I accept the responsibility of fathering a new generation that will bridge our civilizations. I pledge to raise these children with knowledge of both worlds, respect for both traditions, and the freedom to choose their own destiny among the stars. The genetic bonding process itself was conducted with both scientific precision and ceremonial dignity. Advanced medical technology ensured optimal conditions for conception, while traditional rituals honored the spiritual significance of creating new life. Each pairing was carefully orchestrated based on doctors' research, maximizing both genetic compatibility and the potential for positive hybrid traits. The weeks that followed were filled with medical monitoring, cultural education, and the complex logistics of preparing for a generation of children who would be unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. found himself studying child-rearing practices while also developing curricula that would introduce human concepts of family bonding and emotional development. The first confirmed pregnancy came just 3 weeks after the ceremony. NUS bioscanners detected the unique genetic signatures that indicated successful hybridization, and her initial analysis suggested that the developing embryo possessed the enhanced characteristics that theoretical models had predicted. Cellular development exceeds all projections, doctor reported during the weekly medical briefing. Neural pathway formation is occurring at rates that suggest significantly enhanced cognitive capacity, while physical development markers indicate superior strength and endurance characteristics. As more pregnancies were confirmed, the excitement throughout the empire was palpable. News networks across all 47 star systems carried regular updates on the historic developments, while scientists from dozens of species requested permission to observe and study the unprecedented biological experiment. Established regular communication schedules with Earth, providing detailed reports on the progress of the hybrid development program. The response from humanity was mixed. Some viewed him as a hero pioneering a new form of cooperation, while others questioned whether he had overstepped his diplomatic authority by agreeing to such an intimate alliance with an alien civilization. The first birth occurred exactly 8 months and 6 days after conception, as doctors' models had predicted. Delivered a daughter who possessed her mother's violet skin, but with distinctive patterns that seemed to shift and change depending on lighting conditions. The child's eyes were larger than typical proportions, but smaller than pure human features, creating an appearance that was both familiar and entirely new. "She's perfect," whispered as he held his daughter for the first time. The infant's grip was already stronger than a human newborn's, but her responses to voice and touch showed the emotional awareness that characterized human bobbies. She was truly a bridge between worlds, carrying genetic gifts from both species while representing something entirely unprecedented. The medical data from the first birth provided crucial insights for the remaining pregnancies. The hybrid children showed accelerated development in some areas while following normal patterns in others, creating a complex mosaic of traits that required entirely new approaches to pediatric care and education. Ra's son was born 2 weeks later with distinctive silver markings across his violet skin and an apparent ability to perceive electromagnetic frequencies that neither parent species could naturally detect. Elle delivered twins, a phenomenon virtually unknown in biology, whose synchronized movements and apparent telepathic connection suggested new forms of consciousness that no one had anticipated. As more children were born, patterns began to emerge that excited scientists throughout the galaxy. The hybrid offspring showed remarkable adaptability to various environmental conditions, enhanced immune systems that provided resistance to diseases affecting both parent species, and cognitive abilities that seemed to process information in fundamentally new ways. Found himself at the center of a revolution in relations. Diplomatic missions from dozens of civilizations requested meetings to discuss the implications of successful human hybridization. Some sought similar arrangements for their own species, while others wanted to study the children to understand how genetic diversity might benefit their own populations. The children themselves grew rapidly, displaying curiosity about both their human and heritage while developing personalities that transcended traditional cultural boundaries. They communicated in a mixture of languages, created art that combined human emotional expression with technical precision, and approached problems with innovative thinking that drew from both biological backgrounds. When the oldest children reached their first birthday, they were already demonstrating capabilities that amazed observers from both species. They could adapt to gravitational variations that would challenge trained astronauts, process complex mathematical concepts through intuitive understanding, and display emotional intelligence that helped them navigate the complex social dynamics of their unique situation. Established the Hybrid Heritage Academy, an educational institution designed specifically for children who carried genetic material from multiple species. The curriculum combined the best elements of both human and educational philosophy, while remaining flexible enough to accommodate the unique learning styles that emerged among the hybrid population. The success of the program attracted attention from across the galaxy, and soon other species were requesting similar opportunities for genetic collaboration. The Empire found itself at the center of a new form of diplomacy based on biological cooperation rather than traditional territorial or trade agreements. Empress reflected on the changes that had transformed her empire as she watched teaching a group of hybrid children in the palace courtyard. What had begun as a desperate attempt to prevent extinction had evolved into something far greater, a new model for how civilizations could grow and thrive through cooperation rather than conquest. "Your species has given us more than genetic salvation," she told during one of their regular meetings. "You have shown us new ways of thinking about identity, heritage, and the possibilities that emerge when different peoples choose to build something together rather than apart." The hybrid children represented more than just biological success. They embodied a new vision of what galactic civilization could become. As they grew and developed, they would face challenges that neither parent species had encountered, but they would also possess capabilities that neither species could achieve alone. Often stood in the observation deck where the Empress had first shared her desperate request, watching his children play in the crimson sands of while communicating with friends on distant Earth through quantum communicators. They were citizens of both worlds and representatives of a future where the boundaries between species meant less than the connections they chose to forge with one another. The greatest test of the hybrid program came when the first children reached adolescence and began to grapple with questions of identity and belonging that had no precedent in galactic history. Some struggled with feeling caught between two worlds, while others embraced their unique status as bridges between civilizations. The solution came from the children themselves, who formed support networks and cultural groups that celebrated their mixed heritage while creating new traditions that honored both backgrounds. They developed their own languages that incorporated elements from dozens of species, artistic forms that transcended traditional boundaries, and philosophical frameworks that addressed the unique challenges of multi-species identity. As aged, more slowly than pure humans due to genetic modifications that resulted from his exposure to medical technology, he watched his descendants spread throughout the galaxy. Some became diplomats who specialized in relations, others pursued scientific research into genetic diversity, and still others chose military careers where their unique capabilities made them valuable in protecting peaceful cooperation between civilizations. The Empire had not just survived its reproductive crisis, it had evolved into something entirely new. The hybrid bloodlines had revitalized the entire civilization, bringing fresh perspectives to ancient problems while maintaining the core values that had built the Empire across 47 star systems. Years later, when historians analyzed the transformation of galactic civilization that began with one human's decision to accept an alien empress's desperate request, they would mark this as the moment when the galaxy began to understand that diversity was not a challenge to be overcome, but a resource to be cultivated. The children born from choice had proven that the future belonged not to any single species, but to those willing to build bridges across the vast distances between worlds.